Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan Podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside me as always. Again, guys, be sure to subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube, and be sure to actually subscribe to our other channel, That Milan Pod. The link is in the description for that channel, so please be sure to go over there, subscribe to that one. That's where a lot of the short form content is going to be on, and everything that you see in terms of Milan related content will be uploaded over there. We're going to plan on shifting a lot of the content that we do here eventually over to that channel, so that channel has its own identity. But first, we need to build that up. So the best way to do that is by you guys going over there to subscribe, on top of the fact that we do have Apple, Spotify, and any other audio platform. That is not going to change, making that very clear. That is all going to be there. You don't have to subscribe to another podcast. But as far as YouTube content goes, the plan is to shift over to another channel in the long run. But for now and the rest of this season, we will be here. So, Matt, we are back, and it's not good. We'll just rip the Band-Aid off, right? Obviously, I went live after Milan had been eliminated to Feyenoord. And again, when I say lose on aggregate here. Matt, this was disastrous, embarrassing. Not much anger on my end, like frustration more so, but can't say I'm that surprised, appalled by what Theo did. Obviously, we'll get into that, but just the overall reaction to Milan being eliminated to Feyenoord, who had a litany of issues, and Milan come out the gates, score within the first minute. Things looked like they were going to right the ship, and then the wheels fell apart. So your thoughts?
Yeah. Disappointment, some anger. Obviously, the anger was more the initial reaction and feeling towards it because obviously, it felt like Milan had that despite all their flaws this year, despite all the, the game against Dinamo Zagreb. By all accounts, it felt like that Milan coming into this second leg, they had the opportunity to, at the very minimum, have their Champions League run fall short or end in the round of 16, which I think would have been a respectable finish given the fact that they changed coaches this year. They have a very much different team than the one they started the season with in the Champions League. And they get into this game and you get the perfect start, the dream start, right? The big striker you brought in, the man you brought in, Santiago Jimenez, to effectively produce at this stage on this level in moments like this. He does so against his former club at home, sends the place into a frenzy. Everyone's feeling very good about and positive about Milan's chances of advancing. I know it's a lot of match left, but still, the first half of that game, by all accounts, was dominated by Milan. I mean, the chances were there. Still some things to work on in the final third, especially with a lot of the newer signings that Milan have made. But generally speaking, Milan were holding the upper hand. That is until Theo Hernandez needlessly commits the yellow card. I think the
first one
reasoning behind why he was doing that was I think João Felix got fouled or supposedly got nicked, and Theo wanted the game to stop, and it didn't seem as though Feyenoord were maybe doing that. So he took it upon himself to pull down the Feyenoord player. That gives him a silly yellow card. And when that yellow card happens, you're looking back at it, you're kind of thinking like, this is an interesting spot for Conceição and Milan to be in, because this isn't exactly the most disciplined player that we have on the team.
Who would have been suspended for the first leg.
He would have been suspended for that game, assuming, we advanced and we played either Inter or Arsenal in the round of 16, right? So Milan would have been without their best option at this position regardless.
Yeah.
The fact that he commits that foul in a non-threatening area makes it more annoying and bothersome. It's one thing to commit something like that in a dangerous area where, you're giving yourself up and you're giving yourself the opportunity and the team the opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to take one for the team in a more tactical area of the field. Middle of the pitch, Feyenoord again, not really doing much of anything, gives them a yellow card. And now all of a sudden, you and I know when you have a player that's on a yellow card, what are you going to do? You're going to try to kind of instigate. You're going to try to force him into making another mistake or committing a reckless foul or whatever. In this case, 7 minutes later, Theo Hernandez dive simulation gets a yellow card, and he looks bewildered, as if everyone watching, as if there's no cameras, can't see that he blatantly dove with no contact whatsoever. Credit to Feyenoord, because I didn't think that even with the player going in to kind of meet Theo in that sort of instance, it didn't even seem as though he was going in there recklessly anyway. So it's not like you're anticipating like a more like cynical, reckless, aggressive challenge from the player. He was, by all accounts, looking to just draw a foul versus continuing the movement and sequence of play and passage of play, because he was in a dangerous area. He could have even done something with that. Instead, he dives, no questions asked. Credit to the official. I will say this. I try to be very fair in a lot of these situations when it comes to cards and all those sorts of things. In this era of football, I actually applaud the courage and bravery of the official to make that call. Because
it would have been reversed anyway. Say like
but still, the fact
but
that
like
he's
it would have like they would have gone, because it's technically a red card offense at that point, because it would have given him the second yellow.
But regardless, if whether or not he can lean on VAR or not, I don't really care too much about that, and I frankly don't like that part of VAR and officiating. Is, well, I'm just going to kind of just call it, and it's a silly call at the time. Everyone can see that it's not a clear foul, or it is a clear foul, but I have backup. I'm just going to make a crazy call. He called it in that moment a very crucial play and a crucial card, and he got it bang on, and not many officials will give, in my opinion, a card in that. If this is a different player on Milan, let's say it's Terracciano or even Davide Calabria or someone else, maybe he doesn't give him the yellow card. Maybe he doesn't. However, due to the fact that Theo has that sort of nature to his game where he has this sort of reputation as like embellishing and looking for these sorts of fouls too much.
Let's just like, because we're like speeding up through everything. I want to like,
that's fine.
Take I wanted to talk a little more on the first half before we got into it, because the Theo thing is like a whole subject. You spoke on it plenty, so like we got there. I'll circle back on it. I want to talk a little bit more on the first half though, because of how well they played. Some of those lingering issues with some of their finishing, right? Because I think when Leao was very direct, like he was, it was nice to see. Pulisic still looked, he was doubtful too. There was reports of that. He just got back in that training. It was, you could still see he's nursing something. He played okay. But overall, the half chances that Feyenoord had, right? So say when they were like even strength, we were talking about when Milan, like you were saying, they were dominating that half. Feyenoord, they had half chances, if that, for whatever they had. The right back Reed, who like basically called that Rafa, saying he wasn't quick enough in that first leg. He was getting cooked. Paxiao didn't do much of anything. Milan had them on the ropes, and that environment as well at San Siro, really difficult to play in. There was there would have been a very small chance that they would have been able to win that game or advance to the next round. The fact that like they couldn't get a second goal, it was kind of tough. They did their job. They got ahead immediately. And they were getting some of their chances. And sometimes when Feyenoord were sitting back, like they were sitting back, waiting on the counterattack, it's harder to score in that instance. I see like a bunch of people like saying, why isn't Rafa doing more? Why isn't Santi doing it? Like, it's hard to break that down when they're sitting there like that. Like, what is he supposed to do with the... And again, people... And I just want to address this Rafa thing real quick. Rafa was terrible in the first leg. I don't think there's anyone in the first leg that there's anyone to defend. There was nothing. We've said it. You were talking about it. It was indefensible. No one wanted to come out and say it in terms of like that they played positive. They didn't. It was all negative. And this one, what bothers me before we move to the Theo thing is when you say Rafael Leao didn't create a chance, chances don't count as created if a player doesn't touch the ball. So in the instance where Leao cuts that ball back in that empty space in the penalty area where João Felix is jogging, doing nothing, it doesn't count as a created chance. If João gets there, crashes the box like Reinders did in the 1-1 derby draw, where he poaches that goal, where we're basically successful in that instance, then it counts as a chance created. So then we say he plays well. I don't understand the logic behind that. The second half, to your point as well, bang on about the Teo first yellow. I had made a point that this isn't an instance where Giorgio Chiellini is fouling Bukayo Saka at midfield where it's a tactical yellow, like where he has to make that foul. Teo needlessly gets it. And to the other point too that I know you had brought up, the leader's not stepping up over the two legs here. Like genuinely embarrassing from a Magnan who did terrible on that first goal against Feyenoord. Theo is just the worst representation of a leader over these two legs. Leao, I guess to an extent, I'm not sure if you agree with this, should have done more in the second half. It's kind of hard when you're down a man. I think as a whole, with the whole tie over the two legs, he clearly didn't do enough. So for me, I like, how disappointed are you in these leaders, man? Because like I know we're circling back on the Teo thing now. Like, what the hell? Like, this is this like to you one of like the last moments of like what his career is at Milan? Like, this hard to bounce back from, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of said what my sentiments were as far as how he played, but I mean, I think
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. Just
in moments
future.
like this, in the way he left, and obviously the amount of messages he got on social media, which obviously weren't very pleasant and very colorful, of course, because this fan base is in a ruckus. They're frustrated, and rightfully
Mhm.
so, and they have every reason to. When you go out in this manner, when you commit such a a needless and undisciplined, second yellow, and two yellows really. I don't really know what else to say, to be honest, because I think that, it's one thing to be passionate. It's another thing to be stupid.
Mm,
And I think that there's something about controlled passion, controlled intensity, and we've praised not Rafa, Teo over the years for being that sort of individual in our team where the opposition hates him, they hate going up against him, but you
yeah.
love having him in your corner. For all the reasons we know, the game prime example of the one against Dumfries in the Scudetto winning year,
Correct.
where it's like you like someone in your corner being someone that can defend another
And you
player.
agreed with like getting that second yellow in that instance where they're
Correct,
trying to
correct.
seal off the win.
It's a different circumstance, right? It's not
Yeah.
just yellow for yellow or red for red. It's
It's just
timing. It's the moment, right?
yeah.
And it's one thing for Teo to have committed, that sort of foul in, again, a dangerous area, or the diving in a moment where Milan were down late and he's just trying to create maybe a foul
Yeah.
from nothing.
Mhm.
You can kind of stomach it a little bit better and digest it a little bit more than a match that you have firmly in the grasp of your hand. And by all counts, you creep the door open for them. And now all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we're up a guy. They bring in, I think that Carranza, I don't think he started in this game. The guy they
They
brought
were
over.
missing 10 players.
They're missing 10 players. Their coach, it looks like he's going to be replaced by Robin Van Persie. So
I saw
basically
that, yes.
he gets
Yeah.
hired to effectively eliminate Milan, and then out you go. Thanks for
And
the
kudos to
job.
Feyenoord, by the way,
Yeah.
over the two legs. We should give them credit. They did what they were supposed to do. They played a great game at home. We're not like kind of like slating
No,
them
no.
at all.
But
This is more of like
yeah.
there is a chance they do advance, right, in the second half. You can't say for sure. But like even their players are like, it was a gift. Like Teo gifted them this. It's and that I think right to your point of frustration was neither yellow card was necessary. To like you're saying like, yeah, we can understand that yellow, this, yeah. Bro, which one did it
In
make
7
sense?
minutes too. Like, in a matter of 7 minutes,
Yes.
the pendulum completely swung.
And there was
And
zero contact on the dive, right? I'm pretty sure every
no, there
angle
was
that
no
I saw,
contact
he
there.
wasn't even touched
No.
in
The
any
player
way.
came in,
Not
and then pulled up because he probably said,
yeah.
like, "Oh, I know Teo's gonna dive. He's gonna look for a foul." It's
Just
that's so there's an element to that part of football where you understand who the ball carrier is, who is the
yeah,
person going into that
smart.
that challenge, potential clashing with you.
Yeah,
And he's probably in that moment thinking, I'm going to go in, I'm going to bait him into falling forward.
yeah.
I'm going to bait because I know he's going to look for a foul, so he's going to fall forward and he's going to
You're
try
right.
to draw whatever he can. And
Yeah,
mind you, at that moment, Milan are still ahead. It's not like they're trailing. So
they were coming out pretty good in the second. That was a
yes,
pretty solid like ball by
yes.
like Rafa, I
So
believe, who was the one who
that's what
played it.
makes it more frustrating to grasp. But just to kind of wrap up, because I know your question was, the lasting image
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Theo
sure.
and
No, but
all these sorts of
it's a
things,
large topic.
it becomes this moment was a culmination of Theo Hernandez's last 2 seasons at Milan, in my opinion.
Right. And
Because
mhm.
again, the play is one thing, but now all of a sudden, like, you're on top of your bad play, your attitude and lack of discipline in a crucial moment when you're one of the leaders, you were someone that was in contention for the captain's armband, and you are in contention for an extension. And these are the moments that you earn those extensions. For you to
the
come up short and to,
mhm.
by all accounts, not going to say that directly that Feyenoord wouldn't have come back in this game, but man, it's really hard to say that they would have all of a sudden with 11v11 flipped it and won
Yeah.
the game like that.
Like we were saying, they were having half chances. And
Correct.
again, to your point about that stuff, forgetting what he did against Parma, Lazio, Fiorentina. I mean, Fiorentina, where he's denying his teammates the penalties, being insubordinate to the manager. Lazio, like I was kind of saying, there's two ways to kind of look at it. The optics were terrible, and they did a poor job of being leaders and having to realize that stuff. On top of Parma, he was jogging back. He was jogging back. It's like he's dogging it. It's like he doesn't care. And to your point, he's got 1 year left on the deal after this one. So they already had considered accepting that offer from Como in January, who were offering 46, 47 million. It was Teo himself who denied it. I think there's just a little bit more to kind of like discuss because I know it was brought up. So with the Sergio Conceição side of things, he took blame for it. Again, I think a lot of people rightfully highlighting how poorly Theo put Milan in a position here. This also was taking place over 2 legs and how awful Milan were in that first one. I would say the second one, there's just a couple things here. So Santi Jimenez had a slight abductor issue on top of it sort of being tactical from Conceição's words. We knew Pulisic has been nursing injuries. He wasn't starting over the weekend against Verona. They have been trying to manage him. He's been hurt basically the past 2 months, and when he's returned, he's still nursing injuries. He came off against that match against Como, I believe it was. So he hasn't been entirely healthy. So I understood coming from with that. It's difficult when you're also down a man. The João Felix side of things, I would like to tell people and U.S. men's national team fans that do watch this podcast and are interested in Milan, I'm trying to let you know there is a lot more nuance to this, and it's not anti-American because it's ridiculous. To insinuate anti-American is insane because guess what? He started Yunus Musa and sat Yusuf Fofana for this one. So Fofana was sat for leg 2, and Musa has been getting plenty of play even after his red card in Dinamo Zagreb as well. So that sort of anti-American bias is a little ridiculous. Also, in terms of like Portuguese players, João Felix is playing a lot because one, he didn't play at Chelsea at all. They loaned him in because they needed help up front. I'm not defending these decisions tactically, but I'm letting you know these are why these decisions are being made. Christian Pulisic in the club, and if you want, we can like transition to that, or you want a quick thoughts on the substitutes because there wasn't like how
Yeah.
much do you think he could really have done, really quick before we switch to the
I mean,
Pulisic side?
it's difficult to say, right? I think at the end of the day, the second yellow card, the sending off for Theo comes at what, the 51st minute mark. So still 30, 40, almost 40 minutes of football left
Yeah.
for Milan to try and keep their composure, maybe defend, and maybe see this one out and somehow survive and move on to the round of 16. So there was time for Milan to gather themselves, regroup, galvanized behind the fact that they're down a player and they're at home, show some ball, show some grinta, and get through to the next round. They did not do that. I'm not going to say that the substitutions were all bang on from Sergio. I try to be very objective. I like Sergio. I like what he's done so far. I like the fact that he's trying to bring, this mentality up to where it needs to be when you're representing Milan and at this club. But the one thing that I do really appreciate about him is that he didn't direct the blame at Theo in the post-match. He didn't
Correct. Yeah.
say this was his fault. You know, he didn't do a Gasparini thing where he's basically saying like, Lookman's, he's terrible at penalties. He shouldn't have been doing it.
Another
It
loser.
looks very bad, and that's how you don't get the respect and command of the locker room and the changing room. This is a coach that's only been here for a month and a half, almost 2 months. This isn't a guy that's been here for 4 or 5 years where he knows the personality of all these players. He has the complete control of everybody. This is a new group, right? From the one that started this year. And also he's still learning a lot of how these players operate. The fact that he took the blame is what I want to see. Because at the end of the day, him deflecting and not taking accountability is not how he's going to win the changing room. And it's not the type of distraction that you want down the stretch when Milan, the truth of the matter is they still have things to play for, and they still have a potential top 4 spot that they do need to get.
Which is going to be top 4, by the way.
It's going to be top 4. I think they're third now, behind England and Spain.
Yeah.
Right? So I just want to say that all the people that are criticizing Sergio for the substitutions, you can, but you can also be very objective and appreciate the fact that he took the onus on himself and responsibility for the things that he didn't do and the things that he can control, which again is getting the substitutions correctly, is making the tactical adjustments once the red card does occur to get Milan to the round of 16. And this, again, my final point on this, we can move on to Pulisic.
Sure.
We're having a different conversation here potentially, and this is, again, all ifs, ands, buts, whatever. The Dinamo Zagreb game. This isn't just 100%. A one-off game. This isn't just a 2-leg conversation. This stems back to that game because that game was very mishandled. And again, a crucial red card at this stage will derail you from getting to where you want to be. And it did exactly that. Because that red card by Musa forced Milan into a position like they had in these 2 games where you now had to play additional games. You had to risk more players for these games. And now it comes at the call. Look at a team like Inter. Right? Look at a team like Inter. Look at all the teams that just bowed out, right? Atalanta and Juventus, right? Wouldn't have been a luxury. You mentioned all the injuries from Pulisic, right? You mentioned Rafa. You mentioned all these players that have been banged up in a lot of games 3 to 4 times, right? That game against Dinamo Zagreb set the tone for this. Because you control that game and you move on, now you have a little layoff, and now you can rest your guys. Focus on the Serie A games, which are still very important. Maybe you rest Pulisic a little bit, because there was even a report that I read that if it wasn't for being such a crucial game, Pulisic probably wouldn't have even been called up for this game or been starting. So it just goes to show you how much these players had to sacrifice and how much Milan had to give tactically with their selections and the availability of certain players for them to not even advance and for it to be worth it anyway.
It's and just they're great points. You're right. And just real quick, I guess we should talk about the goal conceded. I'll just like highlight it. Listen, it's really difficult to mark in the box when you're down a man. Bartizagi, Pavlovic put in kind of difficult positions. Shout out to Pavlovic. I know like some people want to blame him for it. Listen, Pavlovic was phenomenal once again. I thought he's done a great job. He's really progressing well. Still has a lot to work on. Don't get me wrong, but I thought he put in a good performance, and it's unfortunate that it was overshadowed by what happened. Now, moving on to things that are to me, these are very important things for many reasons. One, this Christian Pulisic news, and it's just complete fabrication bullshit. And I'm going to get out ahead of it. And like I had this morning on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, about these fictitious reports coming out of La Repubblica, which is not, and I repeat, not a reputable source. It is not a reputable source. This is gossip news. This is BS up the wazoo. Constantly lies being told, okay? I have to reiterate it to people because I understand from certain U.S. men's national team fans that aren't really familiar with how the news works in Italy and how Milan are framed. This isn't, first of all, them just pinpointing Pulisic. They do this to Rafael Leao. They do it to plenty of other players within the team. And this has been a constant for a while. They're even doing it towards the manager. They've had to make up news about Sergio Conceição and how Milan management was upset at him for going to Da Costa's funeral, someone who was a father figure to him. And mind you, by the way, Sergio's parents both passed away by the time he was 18. This was a father figure for him. The club was okay with it. I know this firsthand, okay? They were this BS spread by Fabio Caressa is unethical. I think it was crossing the line of BS to drive a wedge between professionals and managers and management for their job because someone went to go and mourn someone that was really important in their life. Shame on you for that. And secondly, this Pulisic stuff, this report coming out of La Repubblica, every outlet that's reporting it is mentioning Pulisic had supposedly gotten in a fight with Sergio Conceição, which is hilarious to me because in that same article and report, it also had mentioned Yusuf Fofana. And by the way, Fofana was the one who did not start in the Champions League. And Pulisic was the one to start despite the possible injuries. Christian was also on the record stating that he liked Sergio Conceição. So the fact that we're going off of reports that are not reputable, and forgive me for saying this, U.S. men's national team fans, and by the way, in case you couldn't tell, I am American. Matt is also American. We're not anti-USA here. We literally live here. We root for the U.S. men's national team. And these are for people who don't know this as a background. Just to reiterate it, Matt has to say it all the time. So the fact that we're having people who don't truthfully know all these newspapers, Matt, we have to let them know this is bullshit. Gazzetta dello Sport, it's bullshit. A lot of these papers push bullshit. If you're going to want to listen to somebody, please, if you listen to this podcast or if you're fairly new, Antonio Vitiello is a great source to get your Milan news. When stuff comes out of that, listen to him, okay? Please stop listening to these newspapers that are notorious for making stuff up and driving wedges to get reactions out of you guys, okay? There's a reason why we don't normally react to those news because we know it's bullshit. Just like we called out the Sergio Conceição and the pink hair thing was also bullshit. There's no substantiated proof to back this up. Conceição has to constantly go out in his press conferences to talk about this stuff. Milan themselves, Matt, and can you ever remember the last time that the club themselves has to come out and refute a report?
I think it was Alessio Romagnoli being linked
to Chelsea. That was the other one that I had remembered. So we're just zooming in on this. The club had to literally come out and say it. Well, they tweeted it from their account, but it was Pulisic saying, I've never argued with the coach and I never had to ask to leave. I'm very happy at Milan and I want to continue wearing this shirt. Reading these lies is unacceptable, but let's all continue to remain united, fight together on the pitch for the club and for our fans. So from the horse's mouth, Matt, he's literally telling you this is not true. And the fan overreaction is getting ridiculous. Remember, guys, few things before I let Matt speak on this. He's nursing an injury. He can't play him every 3 days because then we'll miss him for longer. And he's very important to the squad. 3, he has literally publicly stated that he likes the manager. And 4, Sergio has to denounce all this fake news and he's tired of it himself. So, guys, when you add all that up, what does that tell you? The newspapers are lying. They're lying about this stuff. And you have to understand this is all they do for the most part. And that's all I have to say with my piece there. So, Matt, go ahead.
He's also set to sign a new contract. So
yes, correct.
I think it's kind of a tiring thing. And this kind of comes with the territory
for us, but US
of supporting Milan, and obviously this kind of comes with also the territory of when you aren't successful on the field, you aren't getting results, you aren't as a club in the best position when it comes to meeting certain goals and being a team that is more of a threat to win trophies on a consistent basis. This comes with the territory. When you win, a lot of these issues, a lot of these stories in the media, they don't really come out and they don't really have any pull or weight because people will say, well, this is just the media trying to do this. This is classic media. This is classic Italian media and classic football media. When things are going badly and you have bad results, here comes this player's unhappy. He wants to leave in the summer. This player doesn't want to sign his new deal after a rift with the coach. And this has been the blueprint really since he arrived. If Milan weren't getting results, this player had an issue with Sergio. This player had an issue with Sergio. He wants to leave. He wants to get sold. Makes an ultimatum. It's either him or me. When you win, you can kind of quell all that. That gets put to the side. Unfortunately, winning does cure a lot. It also gives you that luxury to, I guess, maybe not luxury, but it also gives you the opportunity to refute those in a certain way because your play is justifying the opposite of that, right? If you follow what I'm saying, it validates the opposite of what's being spewed in the media. So it is what it is. I think this also comes with baggage when you play for a club like Milan.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
You want the money, you want the attention, you want the glory when you win. This is something that I'm not saying players should have to deal with, but when you sign for a club like Milan, you're also signing on for what also comes with that, good, bad, or indifferent. And unfortunately, they have to put out these tweets like this because
it got so bad over here in the States
for a while. Not saying the club should be addressing every single rumor that comes out,
of course,
but my goodness, can we just talk about the lack of, I guess, I don't know, words from those that should be standing in the face or standing in front and shielding and guarding players from blatant deceit and lies and unjust publications.
reports. Yeah.
Right? Zlatan likes to be front and center when it comes to transfers. He likes to speak on everything else.
Yeah.
Where's he on this? The account said more about a player's future and the situation than Zlatan has.
Mm-hmm.
Than Forlani has.
Yep.
Then those that are directly in charge of those players' futures when it comes to whether or not they get sold or whether or not it's the coach or the player, they're not saying anything. And I understand there's something to be said about, addressing everything, because if you address it, some people might think, well, you're talking about it, so now you're bringing attention to it, and it becomes a story. So that part of it continues to be yet another issue with how things are done here, because this team and a lot of these players, especially Rafa, have been getting slandered in the media. Casano, all these players, weekly basis, and there's criticism. And then there's a lot of unfair BS.
Of course.
That people like Zlatan, you bring him in for a reason, right? He likes to be front and center for everything. He likes to throw his name around and to speak on certain things. Where are you shield guarding and defending your players? Where are you?
You're right. I think we'll probably see something in this press conference from Conceição prior to the Torino match. I think there will be a lot of things addressed in terms of that. Again, guys, U.S. men's national teams fans, please listen. We have no biases here. We like Pulisic a lot. We're American. We're Milan fans above all. We want to see these guys succeed. We're not, we like Pulisic better or Rafa better. If you want that toxicity, get out of here. You're not rooting for Milan. If you're interested in some Pulisic stuff and our takes on some of that, you could stay, whatever, it's fine. Please stop pushing this agenda of driving what La Repubblica as a newspaper publication are pushing, and that's lies. And it's just deceitfulness. The fact that, again, like Matt is saying, they never do this. The club never comes out to say that this stuff is unfounded. That's how egregious it was, that the club literally had to come out and say this. Because the outcry in the States was that, it's anti-American. They don't like this. Brother, please listen. They don't like anything with Milan. They haven't liked anything with Milan. They will not report anything justly.
Also, Milan sell stories and clips.
Milan are here for clips. Dude, it's not disrespectful to U.S. men's national teams fans. You have not been here for that long, okay? You have not been here over the years to see all the other bullshit. And it's not your fault. That's fine. Thankfully, you weren't here for it. You don't want to deal with it. But seriously, it's just, you guys got to ignore that stuff. And if you're curious on what publications that you think should be followed or be interested in, or what you should ignore, please ask us. We'll be happy to share that with you. We don't think that this actually helps anybody in this situation. Doesn't help Pulisic, doesn't help us having to answer to it, doesn't help you guys stressing out over all this nonsense. Listen, it's fake news. It's been refuted as such. So take it at that face value, please. Okay. Moving on to more annoying things. Milan have to play this weekend. They face Torino. This match was the one that kicked off the season where Milan came back against them. Obviously, we're headed to Torino this time because the first match against them was at San Siro. For Milan, listen, nothing but 3 points here. Since Sergio Conceição came to Milan, no team besides Napoli has had more points within Serie A. That's a good and bad thing. It's a bad thing because Serie A is pretty terrible because Milan are not playing that great, but it's a good thing for Milan because they're playing well. The other bad news is that Juve and Atalanta are also playing once a week now on top of Napoli. So that chase for the top four is becoming even more difficult. And obviously, we are not forgetting Lazio and Fiorentina. Milan will also have to play midweek once again against Bologna for that makeup game. So again, Matt, heading into Torino, really difficult spot. And I could see just by your reaction right there, you really don't want to deal with this one. Yeah, this one's tough. Milan usually struggle historically on the road at Torino. They've had some really good matches against them. This one, I don't expect any different. I think Torino are playing pretty well this year. They're a respectable side. And Milan are going to have their work cut out for them. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of players are going to be chosen and selected to start within this game. So give me your sort of like overlook and what your thoughts could be on this situation entirely.
It's going to be interesting to see where Milan's head's at, right? Because I think, there was so much energy, both good and bad, that came from the beginning of that Feyenoord game to the end of that Feyenoord game. And obviously that's been a huge talking point, not just for Milan, but for Serie A, right? Where Atalanta and Juventus also bowed out in pretty miserable and embarrassing fashion, call it like it is, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams sort of regroup quick. They have to regroup quickly from that embarrassment in the Champions League midweek. And Torino, they're not a pushover. They're not a laydown. This is a team that typically plays Milan tight, regardless of player changes over the years and coaching changes, whatever. This is a team that Milan can struggle with. I mean, you mentioned the first game of the season. I think it was the no Okafor goal that gave Milan a point, but they didn't play that great in that game. And Milan didn't start great this year at all.
Well, I believe.
Right? So, I mean, it's difficult for me to say how I see this one shaping up. I mean, I've been of the belief and feeling for a while now that, it's just results based. Like,
yes,
I'm not asking for great football. I want 11 players on a pitch at one time. Sorry, Ted, I'm just taking a little shot at you.
90 minutes, yeah.
Like, discipline. This team has a lot of red cards, a lot of yellow.
We had a lot of red cards last year around this time.
Yeah, this team is
wrong, right?
This team, again, controlled passion. Be smart. Be smart. Just because you're deemed an aggressive player, or you want to play high octane football, or you want to play the way that Sergio sort of wants to set you up and that his sort of personality transmits as being a sort of hard-headed, like sergeant type coach, doesn't mean you have to be stupid. You can be aggressive pressing. You can be aggressive going into 50-50 balls and trying to win back the ball, win back possession. You can do those things. You could still play smart and controlled. There's controlled chaos and controlled energy. And I think that's what Milan needs to, right? They can either be very angry and aggressive in the game like this and come out very tense and looking to maybe force things that aren't there, or they can say, hey, we need to kind of just now focus on this game. Feyenoord's done. This is what matters. And João Felix, I think he had a quote with Sky. I think it came out, he was disappointed, who isn't, right? That he can't play more Champions League games. He wanted to play more Champions League games with this team. This is one of the reasons why he came to Milan, because they're in the Champions League. And he gets two games. He gets 2 games and they get bounced.
He sucked them both.
But he says that they still have the opportunity to get top 4 and they still have Coppa Italia. That's where the energy goes. That's where I'm going to go. You can't dwell on the Feyenoord game any longer after this podcast.
100%. You're right.
So we'll wait and see. I mean, again, it's not going to be it's not going to be an easy visit. Torino at home, good team, respectable team. They give us fits. They play teams very tight. And Milan have to bring the energy. They have to bring the effort. If we see more of the same problems going into this game, and it's the same offenders of those problems, I'm really starting to ask a lot more questions, and I'm really starting to also get with that more answers as to who the problem here is and who the problem is not.
What was I ranting about last episode? Right at the end. I hate that it became true so quickly.
It's a if you're a professional and you don't get your way or you don't see eye to eye with the coach, you throw a tantrum and now all of a sudden you don't play and now you basically say, I'm not going to try because I want to get the coach out.
Get the fuck out.
Or I don't want the coach here or whatever.
Leave.
You got to go at that point. So
you gotta go.
Beyond just getting results, there's a lot of players within this team
Pride
that have to reflect and understand the moment and really prove to the fan base whether or not they should stay here beyond the season. And I'm not just talking about Theo. I'm talking about a lot of other players because the truth of the matter is this. Fans are fed up. They don't care about who the players are. They want to see a winning product. They want to see a successful AC Milan again. If that means with or without a Mike Maignan or with or without a Rafael Leao, with or without a Theo Hernandez, so be it. So be it. This is a pro-Milan podcast. This is a Milan first podcast before any singular individual player.
And that's exactly what I was talking about last week.
Correct. So we need to see energy. We need to see effort with the games that we have in front of us on our plate. That's all I can ask for at this point.
Because I think, listen, don't like this team. Like their vibe in general is what I'm saying. I think a lot of people agree with that. I still think, I know it might sound insane, they have an outside chance of making top 4. Now they need a lot of help in their way, but they also control a lot. I'm not confident in any of these upcoming fixtures. I will make that very, very clear. So for me, I think this is ultimately going to come down to Milan having to do their best to, prove that they belong here in the long run. Like Ollie Fischer honestly said this last year, Sempre Milan. He said it right after the Roma game. He said, I'm sick and tired of these players. No one wants to call out the players for it. Rightfully calling out Pioli for the certain things. Like you and I have called out like management. We've called out managers. And this goes layers beyond layers beyond layers. But at the same time, like I said last week, there's a common denominator. After the management changes, after the managers change, 3 different managers, who's still here? The players are still here. The guys that they had signed and are trying to prove that they can make an impact are still here. That's the issue at hand. And if these guys, it's to me, Matt, I don't know if you agree with this, they're basically on an audition for a good amount of these players for the rest of the season. There's quite a few guys here where your job is on the line. For me, I think someone like Theo Hernandez, it kind of seems like he's on his way out. I would also say if Mike Maignan doesn't sustain his level, it looks like he's extending his contract. Tijani Reinders looks like he's extending his contract as well. I think he pretty much confirmed till 2030. And the same is going to go for Pulisic, who's also going to be extending till 2029. Sorry, he's not at Chelsea anymore. Not going to sign that long of a deal. And truthfully, I'm okay with those players. I really like those players. I think someone like Theo, and I hated to be the one to kind of start maybe the conversation. I'm not saying I was the first one to do it. I did bring up that conversation months ago about like we need to have this uncomfortable conversation about him because it's 2 seasons in a row now of declining play. He hasn't extended his contract. The club are looking to cash in on him. Who knows what happens? I'm not going to be irate if he stays, but like he needs to prove a lot if he does. So with that, predictions, Mr. Santangelo. You've been dead on the nose for quite some time on these. So what do you got?
2-1 Milan.
Okay, you're going with a Milan win. I'm going 1-1 draw. Okay. I think negative energy is carrying over. I'm not too sure that Milan are going to shake this off so soon. I don't also anticipate Pulisic starting in this one.
No.
They have a quick turnaround to Bologna. One could argue Bologna is a tougher one. These are both on the road, mind you. Torino and Bologna are both away. Bologna is that makeup game from October. So It's difficult. It's really difficult regarding Milan and how you kind of look at them. For me, I got 1-1. You got 2-1. Again, guys, we just like to reiterate: subscribe to our other channel at the Milan Podcast. You can follow Matt everywhere at Matt_Santangelo, at AC Milan Bros. That him and his brother do great work. Again, we greatly appreciate everything that you guys do in terms of supporting us. All sorts of fans, the Elm Tree fans who have come through, the U.S. men's national team fans. We all have love for everybody. We're all rooting for Milan. That's the most important thing at the end of the day, guys. We just want to make that clear. Again, go and subscribe to the Sempre Milan podcast and YouTube channel, Old Hard Rossonero, Football Crush, me Marco. I actually debuted on the podcast Milan Fan TV. Milan Fan TV are finally back on TikTok. They're a huge account. I was on their debut podcast, so go ahead and check that channel out. They have a huge following on TikTok. They do a great job regarding Milan. Again, Milan Weekly Podcast, our great friends over there, Marcello and Vin and Jan, as well as the ever so colorful Fabio and Gio on Milan Coast to Coast. Those guys are just, again, I'm telling you, they're the most entertaining two guys that I think you could watch a podcast with. And am I missing anyone else, Matt, before I sign off here? I don't think so, right?
No, I know there's a lot. So I think
There's a
if you
lot.
miss anybody, you guys
I
can let us know in
covered.
the comments. If there's someone that we typically miss on our wrap up of each podcast, definitely link us, show us some, love in the comments, and we'll be sure to shout them out. But thank you guys for supporting, and let's just turn our attention to Torino. That's the next game on our plate. That's the focus for us. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, guys, also just real quick, I forgot to plug myself at Martino_Puccio here on the YouTube channel. Always follow us here, the Milan Podcast. The lives are going to be here. Again, we greatly appreciate all of you. Apple, Spotify, give us 5 stars. Keep listening on there. Share on there. Get us more listeners on top of also being here on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. Other than that, see you next time.